Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing fine in this unprecedented global pandemic. Today, as the Seoul Brand Forum marks its 5th anniversary, we've invited world-renowned scholars to reflect on the past achievements of the Seoul Brand and to explore its new future in this global era. Today, COVID-19 has limited us in terms of space and created a new online society in which we're new citizens. Let's take a look back at the global era, define the new global era, and explore the challenges for Seoul as a city. In the Paris World Fair, held 120 years ago, the electric lights and lamps shone the venue brightly thanks to technological development in the 19th century. Cities were no longer dark, and anesthesia and antibiotics were invented, freeing the mankind from fear of infection and surgery. Celebrating the glorious century that had passed, the world looked forward to a happy and colorful 20th century. But in only 10 years after the 20th century began, World War I broke out, followed by the Spanish flu. Thereafter, mankind underwent World War II mass destruction and development of nuclear weapons. The hope for a bright century was an illusion, and the end of the 20th century was very tragic. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times said, in a globalized world, due to rapid development of ICT and media, news spreads faster, further, and deeper, and in a cheaper way, leaving a starker impression. In human history, a pandemic always left lessons to be learned in the society. In the 14th century, the pest killed half of the European population, but agriculture, industry, financial capitalism, and the Renaissance was born. In 1918, the Spanish flu broke out to accelerate the end of World War, and social order was restored centered around the public health system. While the current pandemic has a similar ripple effect, when the COVID-19 crisis is over, what kind of change will our lives be surrounded by countries and cities face? The global era that led to the integration of the global economy had cities and countries as nodes, and it was an age of efficient network based on simple competition. Poor countries with cheap labor produced freely, and rich countries focused on production of value-added goods and services. So countries and cities coexisted based on a certain standard and form. As a result, Asian and African countries, the poor countries, were able to fight poverty, and the so-called neoliberal globalization was best utilized by China. In the past, with resources, the rich and poor countries, cities, and people had less gap in wealth, and efficient distribution and procurement of resources was possible. So sustaining the system and solving the inefficiencies seemed to be the way forward for the world. But based on globalization, resources and knowledge were efficiently distributed, accelerating freedom of ownership and production of knowledge, which greatly enriched the rich over the poor. In a knowledge-based society, the emergence of the elite and growth of knowledge production caused an unexpected level of economic inequality. Rather a problem of capitalism itself, it was a result of knowledge and information being used by the elite in an unlimited way to accumulate wealth in a system of meritocracy. This is the vulnerability of a stable global network. Until now, globalization failed to consider many variables needed for a stable global network. It moved toward distributed production solely based on competition. In the past, artifacts preserved or restored the inter-country or inter-city network. And COVID-19 artificially disconnected this. Countries and cities have closed down doors, cut exchanges, and undermined the ability to procure resources needed for networking inevitably. Michael Porter described globalization as borderless movement and expansion of goods and capital without limitation. However, Ian Golding said the quantitative expansion of globalization will create the pandemic, financial crisis, cyber terrorism, and other risk factors for the system and institution. Pope Francis also focused on globalization and unlimited competition leading to the harms of neoliberalism. He said that free movement in the market to be the only factor freeing the mankind and countries is an illusion. Facing the global pandemic, the global system revealed its weakness, and we realized that a freedom in the market cannot resolve inequalities threatening our society. Where are we headed after COVID-19? Henry Kissinger and global consulting firms including McKinsey said, the end or retreat of globalization. He said that after COVID, the world will become a fortified city centered around the nation and its people. No longer will it be a globalized world based on global trade and collaboration. We may start checking against each other, and we could be competing in a reversed globalization era, he warned. According to Paul Krugman, after the Cold War era, the global economic order shifted towards protectionism. And due to volatility, multinational companies suffered. And trade protectionism brought about a new kind of tension in the global community. It created a lot of wealth, but it was hyper-globalization without retrospection on the foundation. As a result, the network system between countries was threatened in terms of its stability, and the world transitioned to slowbalization, facing the decline of the global world. Globalization led to overall growth of wealth and obsession on wealth. The largest victim here were the people. It led to a loss in all areas, and we call it the era of loss. In the Davos Forum in 2019, Globalization 4.0 was announced to encourage sustainable economic growth, a future based on new technology, and the fourth industrial revolution. But COVID showed that we failed in predicting the future of the mankind. Now, the world must reflect on the true nature of globalization and its foundation. Also, we need to focus on new drivers or factors and the resulting new globalization or neo-globalization supported by creative thinkers. Then what is the new globalization? To give up globalization? We cannot give up globalization because it's our foundation. COVID has weakened the nodes, which are countries and cities, as well as the network. The world is returning to localization in every corner. How to overcome this phenomenon should be the center of focus now. New globalization is not something like Globalization 4.0, the fourth industrialization, or a globalization of the future. It's not a linear development model. In the global disaster caused by a global pandemic, we need globalization that embraces people and values shared growth. So, in the new global era, rich, advanced countries competing for fastest growth with unlimited potential cannot happen as in the previous global era. Rather, the new global era is where countries, cities, people, in a state of crisis, mobilize the spirit of community to collaborate creatively and coexist, but also compete, leading to an era of complementarity. In the new global era, what would be the challenges for cities and communities? First, to overcome crises such as COVID, coming up with a mechanism of mutual caring and bonding. In a global system, from a long-term perspective, we need a safety mechanism supporting basic safety and wealth among cities. In the previous version of globalization, we thought network between countries and cities are only beneficial. But with infectious diseases, financial collapse, and other crises with a spillover effect, the network has a contrary effect. So countries and cities that profit from excessive connection of distribution in the network for long-term mutual relationship should bear a sort of public cost for welfare or social protection. Secondly, for shared growth of cities need to first redefine itself and recognize the value of other cities in a new globalization model of citizenship. In new globalization, common values accepted in the global market does not have the upper hand. As individual cities protect non-economic values such as culture and morality, each city must mutually respect each other culturally to enliven the citizenship of fairness and consideration. At the same time, to respond to COVID-19 in a systematic manner, we need municipal Darwinism. For example, recently, Seoul has been reinforcing its disease control system to track and monitor risk factors in the various virus strains, which has been in the limelight with the brand S-Quarantine. Third, in the new global era, data flow with fast connectivity and platforms will be strengthened under the new normal of a superconnected era. After the pandemic, due to the fear of uncertainty arising from new globalization, people will leverage technology that doesn't require contact to maintain the illusion of a safe and predictable world. The most fundamental change in the post-COVID era will be human relationship being replaced by a new normal optimized by machines and algorithms. Seoul has been recently working with industry to build public platform based on smart infrastructure to prevent and monitor risk, which we need to focus on. Lastly, the new global era will be a time where human-to-human relationship will be redefined and shared. In other words, people will complement each other's vulnerability and accept each other's possibility to maximize connectedness, thereby restoring the age of humanism. The Davos Forum and other global communities focused on globalization of imperialism led by states and companies. They saw Globalization 4.0 as the key to improving the quality of life. The new global era should be a time of spiritual capital, where people are connected and we redefine relationships for a comprehensive improvement in the quality of lives. And this should be the center of discussion for the new global era. But the new global era will not be completely different. It's just giving a new meaning to globalization and reflecting on ourselves. The traditional globalization network should have a sense of community. Otherwise, if there's a vulnerability or crisis in community and cities, we cannot avoid them. In COVID-19, we saw this happen in neighboring countries. Let me wrap up now. By reflecting on the past, cities need to achieve qualitative growth and cooperate with one another to secure self-sufficiency. This is the true functions of cities to coexist based on cooperative governance. The role of the state has already been weakened. Cities and local areas need to strengthen local features and specialties while pursuing globalization in the new global era. City leadership in the new global era, or the Seoul Initiative in the case of Seoul, is the way forward for Seoul to contribute more as a global citizen and coexist with other cities as a leader. In the Seoul Brand Forum, I define the new global era as the time where shared growth and competition of communities complement each other. Now Seoul is at a position capable of leading the challenges in the new global era. In the presidential debate of the U.S., Korea's disease control efforts, or K-quarantine, which is in essence S-quarantine, has been discussed. We can open a new era focused on this brand of S-quarantine and build Seoul's brand. Based on the values of coexistence, passion, and relaxation, we launched the Seoul brand, and we need to expand this to embrace shared growth and connectedness. Let me close my remarks, and we will listen to the presentations of eminent scholars for the future of Seoul. Thank you very much.